The Empire feared one princess, until the second stepped forward. Smoke drifted lazily from a few scorched buildings, remnants of another Imperial raid, and the people moved quickly, voices hushed, fearful of the sound of engines. They had learned long ago that the Empire never forgave mistakes. Among them, a figure in a dark cloak moved silently through the alleys, her face partially hidden by the hood. Princess Celera, the eldest of the human royal line, paused and scanned the horizon. Her sharp eyes caught the subtle shimmer of Imperial drones patrolling overhead. She had led hundreds of missions against the Empire, but each strike carried the risk of discovery. Tonight, however, she could not fail. Tonight, the fate of the colony depended on her. Celera crouched behind a ruined wall, her mind calculating, adjusting. Every patrol, every sweep of the Imperial scanners, every fluctuation in the wind could reveal her position. She had faced these odds countless times, and yet, the thrill of survival never dulled her senses. She had become a legend, known in whispers and secret transmissions across human-controlled systems as the feared princess. Entire Imperial fleets had learned to hesitate, to pause at her name. She was more than a soldier, she was a strategist, a shadow moving through the Empire's heart with deadly precision. But even legends had limits, and she knew that tonight the stakes were higher than ever. The colony's central communication hub had been taken over by Imperial forces the night before. They had installed their control systems, routing transmissions and monitoring every movement. Celera had studied their protocols, learned their weaknesses, and designed a plan that relied on timing, patience, and the cooperation of the local resistance fighters who were too scared to speak her name aloud, but followed her orders without question. A small group of humans, hungry, ragged, but determined, huddled in an abandoned warehouse waiting for the signal. Celera knew the moment had to be perfect. If she moved too soon, the Empire would intercept them. If she moved too late, the colony would be destroyed. Minutes stretched into eternity. Celera's gloved fingers brushed the cold metal of her wrist communicator. The lights from the Imperial drones shifted slightly. She took a slow breath and slipped through the shadows, moving toward the communications hub with the grace of a predator. Every step was precise, calculated. The Empire had underestimated her, as they always did. She used their arrogance against them, turning their confidence into traps. A patrol moved too close, but she melted into the darkness, unseen, unheard, and the humans in the warehouse held their breath. The patrol passed, unaware that death itself had walked past them. Celera allowed herself a brief smile before turning back to her objective. Inside the hub, alarms blinked red, but Celera was prepared. Her tools, small and precise, slid from her belt as she approached the main control console. Fingers flying, she inserted a portable override device, bypassing security protocols the Empire had believed unbreakable. Systems flickered, screens went dark, and in that moment she held the power of the colony in her hands. Transmission lines hummed with the potential for freedom. She whispered to herself, "Not tonight, not while I'm here." The Empire would feel her presence even if they could not see her. The colony would survive tonight because she refused to fail. Outside, a sudden roar of engines shattered the night air. Imperial reinforcements had detected a disruption in their systems, and now they moved to crush it. Celera's mind raced. The situation was critical, more dangerous than anything she had faced in months. She had to finish the override and escape before they surrounded her. Sweat prickled her brow, but her hands were steady. Humans had survived against impossible odds for centuries, and she was determined to continue that legacy. With one final keystroke, the systems fell under her control, and she released a silent signal to the hidden resistance fighters. Their communications lit up, transmitting orders to evacuate civilians to safer sectors. It was a small victory, but in the war against the Empire, even small victories were monumental. The ground shook as Imperial forces landed nearby, their armored vehicles crushing debris under enormous treads. Celera darted through ventilation shafts and narrow passages, avoiding patrols with the skill of someone who had done this 1,000 times. She knew the Empire's response would be brutal. They would hunt her relentlessly, but she had learned their patterns, their arrogance, their belief that no human could outwit them. That belief was their weakness, and she exploited it with every step. She emerged on the outskirts of the colony, breath heavy, heart racing, and for a moment, allowed herself to imagine the freedom her actions had created for the people below. They would live another day, and the Empire would tremble at her name. But the Empire was never forgiving. Distant sirens blared, and the faint shimmer of targeting drones signaled that her escape route had been spotted. Solara cursed under her breath. She had miscalculated, or perhaps the Empire had anticipated her brilliance. It did not matter. Survival depended on action, not regret. She sprinted across the open terrain, using the ruins of the colony as cover, weaving between shadows, ducking behind remnants of buildings. Every movement was deliberate, but the Empire's forces were closing fast. Her ship, hidden in a secluded hangar, was still 30 minutes away, and she would not make it if she relied on luck alone. She needed a new plan, one that relied on human ingenuity rather than the gamble of speed. A low rumble signaled the approach of a hover tank, its energy cannons scanning for movement. Solara flattened herself against a crumbling wall, her mind spinning. Then she saw it, a supply cache of debris and containers. With precise timing, she triggered a series of small explosive charges she had planted during her earlier reconnaissance. The containers erupted, sending flames and smoke into the air, masking her movements and creating confusion among the Imperial troops. She dashed through the chaos, a shadow among shadows, until she reached a narrow passage leading out of the colony. She did not stop. Humans survived not by hesitation, but by the courage to keep moving even when death was all around. As she reached the perimeter, a squad of Imperial soldiers blocked her path. Her pulse quickened, but fear was a luxury she could not afford. She drew her sidearm, a sleek energy weapon designed for precision, and moved with calculated speed. Each shot found its mark, disabling the soldiers without unnecessary risk to the civilians who were now emerging from hiding. The squad fell back, stunned, and Solara pressed onward. She was tired, her body aching from constant exertion, but the fire of human defiance burned brighter than exhaustion. The Empire had tried to break them, but humans had a stubbornness, a refusal to bow that no machine or soldier could fully suppress. Finally, she reached her ship, a small yet agile craft that had carried her through countless missions. She leapt inside, initiating the launch sequence. Engines roared to life, lifting her from the burning planet. The colony below receded, smoke curling into the night sky. The humans who had survived would tell tales of the feared princess, the one who struck fear into the heart of the Empire and ensured that life continued even when hope seemed lost. Solara exhaled, allowing herself a brief moment of satisfaction, but her instincts remained sharp. The Empire would not forget this night, and neither would she. Yet the Empire was cunning. Intelligence reports from their central command noted the incursion and Solara's escape. She had been seen as invincible, untouchable, but the Empire was not done with her. Ships were dispatched, sensors recalibrated, and the hunt began in earnest. The feared princess was no longer just a legend to the humans. She had become a target, the symbol of defiance that the Empire sought to extinguish. Solara knew this, and yet she refused to be intimidated. Humanity had always faced impossible odds, and they had always survived. Why should this time be any different? Hours later, as she navigated through a dense asteroid field, her communicator flickered to life. The voice of her second-in-command crackled through, tense but controlled. "Princess, are you all right? The colony, they're safe for now." Solara smiled faintly. "They're alive, and that's what matters. Prepare the fleet. We have much to do." Even from afar, her presence inspired those around her. The humans who had once cowered in fear now looked toward the stars with hope, knowing that their leaders would fight not just with weapons, but with intelligence, courage, and unyielding spirit. But even as victory settled in her heart, Solara felt a shadow of unease. The Empire would retaliate, and this time they would strike harder. They did not just want to capture her, they wanted to break the symbol of human resistance. And in that knowledge, Solara understood something crucial. Legends could inspire fear, but fear could also be dangerous. One wrong step, one lapse in judgment, and everything she had fought for could crumble. She pressed her hands against the console, recalibrating her sensors, planning the next moves. Humans thrived on adaptability, on resilience, on audacity. She would need all of it if she wanted to survive the Empire's wrath. The stars stretched endlessly before her, a vast battlefield in which humanity dared to stand tall. Solara's ship slipped quietly through the void, unseen but not unobserved. The feared princess was alive, yes, but more importantly, she remained a symbol, proof that humans were cunning, brave, and relentless. Even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, the ember of hope burned bright. And though she did not yet know it, the story of survival, of defiance, of human spirit was only beginning. Somewhere far across the systems, another presence stirred, a figure who had lived in her shadow, who had watched and learned. Soon, the Empire would face a force they had never imagined, and humanity would show, once more, that courage was not bound to one person alone. The stars were silent witnesses as Celera disappeared into the void, the Empire hunting, the humans rising, and the galaxy holding its breath. The quiet of the human fleet was a fragile illusion. Ships drifted through the void, engines humming softly, but the tension aboard was palpable. The loss of Princess Celera to Imperial capture had shaken every system under human control. Yet among the crew, a different kind of resolve began to stir, one that no one had anticipated. Princess Alina, the younger sister who had long lived in Celera's shadow, walked the corridors of the flagship with steady determination. Unlike Celera, Alina had never led missions or commanded fleets. She had been the diplomat, the cautious strategist who avoided attention. But the events of the last few weeks had awakened something inside her, a fire that would not be ignored. Alina paused in the command center, her hands resting lightly on the console as she studied star maps and fleet formations. Her blue eyes, calm but focused, traced the paths of Imperial patrols and supply routes. She was learning, absorbing the tactics her sister had used so brilliantly. She understood now that caution and observation were as powerful as speed and aggression. The humans who had survived against the Empire did so not only because of bravery, but because of intelligence, creativity, and an unyielding will. And if she wanted to step forward, she would need to combine all three. A low hum interrupted her thoughts. Her second-in-command approached, a veteran officer who had seen the rise of Princess Celera firsthand. "Princess Alina, the Council wants to meet. They're worried." His voice faltered, not from fear of her, but from doubt about their chances. "They fear your plans are too risky." Alina shook her head gently. "Risk is not the enemy," she said softly. "Fear is, and if humans are to survive, we cannot let fear decide our actions. Gather the Council." "We have work to do." She walked toward the central map display, tracing the paths of the scattered human colonies. Many had suffered Imperial attacks, some had surrendered. Others were hiding, waiting for hope that might never come. She would give them that hope. Her first step was small. Alina chose a minor system, barely defended, but one where the Empire had grown complacent. She gathered a handful of ships, mostly old freighters retrofitted with weapons and cloaking systems. It was not much, but it was enough to begin. Using the cover of asteroid fields and dense nebulae, she launched raids on Imperial supply lines. Each strike was swift and precise, leaving minimal damage to human settlements but enough disruption to unsettle the enemy. Imperial commanders were initially confused. Reports described the attacks as unpredictable, almost ghostly. They began to whisper, mocking, "Who is this shadow? This inexperienced girl daring to strike where Celera would not?" Alina watched these reports, a faint smile on her lips. The Empire's arrogance was a weapon she could wield. They underestimated her because they believed she was incapable of Celera's brilliance. She would prove them wrong. Every move she made was calculated to teach humans and allies that courage was not the privilege of one princess, but a gift of the people themselves. News of her successes spread quietly, carried by secret transmissions and civilian messengers. Colonies that had lost hope began to stir. A few small fleets, previously dormant, joined her under her banner. She did not command with force but with inspiration, showing that even when faced with impossible odds, humans could act. She studied her sister's tactics but adapted them, creating new strategies that capitalized on the Empire's underestimation. Every raid was a lesson, every victory a spark of courage. One night, while plotting another strike, Alina received a transmission from a remote outpost. The message was simple but urgent. "Imperial patrols are preparing a sweep. Civilians are trapped. Assistance needed." She leaned over the console, her mind racing. This was the opportunity to show not only her fleet but the galaxy that humans could act decisively. "Prepare the ships," she commanded. "We leave at once. Every life counts. Every action matters." Her fleet moved through the void like shadows in the night. The civilians, huddled in fear, could not see the approach of the human ships, only the sudden explosions that cleared the path of Imperial forces. Alina directed her small squadron with skill, guiding them to block patrols, evacuate the trapped colonists, and minimize casualties. It was dangerous, the kind of mission that had made Celera a legend, but Alina handled it with a calmness that belied her inexperience. Every move was deliberate, every decision calculated. When the mission ended, the civilians cheered, their hope rekindled. Reports reached the Empire, and their response was swift. "Another princess?" the generals scoffed. "Do not mistake shadows for threats. This is no Celera." "She will fail." But the shadow had already begun to grow. Alina's name, whispered in hushed tones among human colonies, began to spread. She was not yet a legend, but she was a symbol, a promise that defiance still lived. Days later, she received intelligence of a key Imperial supply depot, heavily guarded, yet critical to the Empire's operations in nearby systems. Most officers advised caution, but Alina saw opportunity. Using stealth ships and decoy transmissions, she devised a plan that turned the Empire's strength into weakness. The attack was precise. While the main force feinted a frontal assault, smaller teams slipped through defenses, sabotaging power grids, communication arrays, and transport lines. Imperial officers were left confused, scrambling to respond, while Alina's fleet withdrew without significant losses. In the aftermath, she addressed the crew. "The Empire fears what it cannot see. They cannot predict our moves because they refuse to believe humans can be clever, fast, and courageous at the same time. We will use that to our advantage. Never underestimate our own strength, and never underestimate the power of hope." Her words resonated deeply. The humans around her, inspired by her courage, began to act with more confidence, making decisions without waiting for orders. Alina had ignited a spark that could not be extinguished. Meanwhile, Alina did not forget her sister. Celera's capture weighed heavily on her. The Empire believed that by imprisoning the feared princess, they had destroyed human resistance. They had miscalculated. Alina used intelligence networks to track Imperial movements, uncovering hints of Celera's location. Each piece of information was carefully logged, each transmission studied. She began to see a path, a way to not only fight the Empire but to rescue Celera. The thought of her sister held in enemy hands drove her determination further. This was no longer about proving herself. It was about ensuring the survival of humanity's symbol, its courage, its hope. Months passed, and Alina's reputation grew. Colonies that had been silent began to rise in rebellion, inspired by her raids and messages. Children whispered her name with admiration, and soldiers who had once despaired now trained harder, determined to match her courage. The Empire grew wary, sending more patrols, recalibrating strategies, but each response was met with ingenuity and precision. Alina learned quickly, adapting to new threats, reading patterns, predicting moves. Humans were resilient because they learned, because they adapted, because they never surrendered. The galaxy began to take notice. During a council meeting on her flagship, Alina addressed the assembled leaders from various human colonies. "We are not a single fleet. We are not a single planet. We are humanity," she said. "We survive because we act together. We fight because we refuse to bow. And we succeed because we believe not in fear but in ourselves." Her words carried weight. She did not speak as a princess giving orders. She spoke as a human, as one who understood the fragility of life and the power of unity. The council, once doubtful, now nodded in agreement. Plans were drawn, missions coordinated, and the rebellion grew stronger. One night, while reviewing mission reports, Alina caught sight of a small message embedded in a distant transmission. It was from an old contact in Celera's network. The words were cryptic, but the meaning was clear. Celera was alive, held on a remote Imperial station. Relief washed over Alina, but it was accompanied by urgency. She could not act alone, and she could not wait. The rescue would require planning, strategy, and the cooperation of every human fleet under her command. She leaned over the map, tracing the paths that would lead to her sister. Every calculation was meticulous. Every step would need precision, but she did not doubt herself. Humans survived because they dared to try, even when failure seemed certain. As she planned, her mind also considered the lessons learned from the recent months. The Empire's arrogance had been their weakness. By underestimating her, they had allowed a small fleet to achieve what they thought impossible. Alina realized that fear, the tool the Empire wielded over humanity for centuries, could be turned back against them. They had feared Solara, yes, but now they would fear not just one princess, but the unyielding spirit of humanity itself. And this fear would not crush humans, it would expose the Empire's own vulnerabilities. The first steps of the rescue mission began with small, calculated strikes, creating diversions, testing enemy defenses, and gathering intelligence. Every successful action emboldened the fleet, every setback became a lesson. Alina learned to balance caution with audacity, strategy with speed, planning with improvisation. She was no longer the girl who had lived in her sister's shadow. She was becoming a leader in her own right, shaping the future of humanity through courage, intelligence, and relentless determination. Word of her actions reached not only human colonies but sympathetic systems that had remained neutral. They offered aid, ships, resources, information. Humans, united not by fear but by purpose, began to rebuild networks the Empire thought destroyed. The rebellion was growing, stronger and more coordinated than ever before. The Empire, still focused on Solara, had underestimated the rise of another force, a leader who wielded intellect and courage as weapons just as lethal as any fleet. Alina stood on the observation deck, watching the stars pass by, each one a potential battleground, each one a witness to human audacity. She clenched her hands behind her back, feeling the weight of responsibility but also the exhilaration of possibility. The first sparks of hope had become flames, and she knew that when the time came, humans would show the Empire that courage was not the privilege of one princess. It was the inheritance of an entire species. The shadows of fear were beginning to recede, replaced by the light of determination. And somewhere in the Empire's grasp, Solara waited, unaware that her sister's rise had already begun, and that the galaxy would soon see the full measure of human spirit. The human fleet moved like shadows through the dark expanse of space, each ship carrying hope, courage, and the unshakable determination of a species that refused to bow. Princess Alina stood on the bridge of her flagship, her gaze fixed on the tactical displays before her. The coordinates showed the location of the remote Imperial station where Solara was held, a place heavily guarded by fleets, defense satellites, and automated weapon arrays. Alina knew that a direct assault would be suicidal. She would need precision, strategy, and deception to succeed. Every calculation mattered, every choice could tip the balance between life and death. She turned to her command staff, their faces tense but resolute. "We will not charge blindly. The Empire expects fear, but they will not find it in us. We will be ghosts in their systems, silent but lethal." Her voice carried authority and confidence, not arrogance, and her words settled nerves. Humans had faced the Empire before, but this was different. They were not only fighting for survival, they were fighting for one of their own, the symbol of defiance who had inspired countless people across the stars. This mission would prove that human courage was limitless. Alina's plan was audacious. She divided the fleet into 3 groups. The first, a decoy, would appear on sensors like a full-scale assault, drawing Imperial attention and firing patterns. The second, smaller and stealth-equipped, would infiltrate defenses, disable communication arrays, and clear escape routes. The third, a fast strike team led by her personally, would enter the station, retrieve Solara, and escape. Each step had to be synchronized perfectly. Failure at any point could doom not only her sister but the fleet as well. Yet Alina was unafraid. Humans succeeded in impossible missions not because of luck, but because they dared to try, because they acted with intelligence, courage, and unity. The fleet approached the station under the cover of a dense asteroid field, the rocks masking their signature from Imperial sensors. Alina's team held their breath as the decoy fleet initiated a series of energy pulses that simulated a major attack. Imperial defenses activated immediately, energy cannons firing at the decoys while automated fighters scrambled to respond. The ruse worked flawlessly. The Empire, confident in their superiority, had taken the bait. They believed they were confronting the main force. They had underestimated Alina. While the decoy fleet kept the Empire busy, Alina's stealth squad moved into position. Small, agile ships weaved through defense grids, hacking into systems, disabling turrets, and cutting off internal communication. Every move was deliberate, precise. The Imperial station, a fortress of steel and firepower, began to falter as human ingenuity disrupted its controls. Sensors flickered, weapons misfired, and alarm systems became confusing mazes of false readings. Humans had no massive fleets or overwhelming numbers, but they had cunning, adaptability, and courage, qualities the Empire could not fully predict. Inside the station, Solara was aware of the disturbances. She had remained calm during months of captivity, studying Imperial protocols and security patterns. The feared princess understood strategy, and she knew that her sister would not abandon her. As she observed flickering systems and unusual activity, hope stirred within her chest. The humans who had once looked up to her were now acting, and perhaps, just perhaps, she would see them again. She prepared herself, aligning her thoughts with the possibility of escape, ready to act when the opportunity presented itself. Elena's strike team moved silently toward the docking bay. Automated defenses still scanned for movement, and patrol drones hovered, their sensors sharp. She issued rapid instructions over encrypted channels, her voice calm and clear. Focus on precision. Disable systems first, avoid unnecessary conflict. Remember, we are here to retrieve Solara, not to destroy the station. The team nodded, their confidence growing as they executed her commands flawlessly. They had trained together for weeks, but this mission was unlike any simulation. Every moment carried real stakes, real danger, and yet fear did not dominate them. Human resolve was stronger. As the team entered the inner corridors, Imperial forces became aware of intruders. Alarms blared, and soldiers moved to intercept them. Elena directed her team with strategic maneuvers, using knowledge of the station's layout to avoid direct confrontations whenever possible. When combat was unavoidable, every shot was precise, disabling rather than killing unnecessarily, a testament to her calculated approach. The human team moved like a single organism, coordinated, intelligent, and relentless. They were not just soldiers, they were a representation of humanity itself, proving that courage was not random or accidental but a deliberate choice. Meanwhile, the decoy fleet outside continued to draw fire. Imperial commanders, convinced they were engaging the main force, poured resources into attacks that were largely ineffective. Their arrogance blinded them to the smaller, more lethal threats moving unseen within their systems. Elena's strategy exploited that arrogance perfectly. The humans were ghosts, slipping through defenses and striking where the Empire did not expect. Each successful action emboldened the fleet, each disruption sowed chaos, and the Empire's confidence began to waver. Elena's team reached the containment area where Solara was held. Energy locks and security doors barred the way, but the princess had taught them well. Using devices adapted from her sister's earlier missions, they bypassed electronic locks, neutralized security cameras, and opened the path to freedom. Solara's eyes widened with recognition as she saw the familiar faces of human resistance fighters, and then, finally, her sister, the one who had risen while she was imprisoned. Hope, fierce and unyielding, burned bright in her chest. "Elena," she whispered, a mixture of relief and admiration in her voice. "You came." Elena stepped forward, her expression calm but resolute. "Of course," she said simply, "we are not alone." "We never were." The two sisters embraced briefly, but there was no time for sentimentality. The station was still hostile, and the mission was far from over. Solara nodded, understanding the strategy. Together, they led the team through winding corridors, disabling remaining security systems, and preparing for extraction. Humans survived because they adapted, because they relied on intellect, courage, and unity, and that is exactly what they were doing now. The Empire realized too late that something was wrong. Reports of internal sabotage reached command, but by the time they reacted, Elena's team was already moving toward the docking bay. Imperial forces scrambled, but human ships had pre-calculated exit routes. Even in the face of superior numbers, the humans maintained their composure, acting decisively and with precision. The feared princess had been rescued by the unassuming sister who had quietly learned, observed, and prepared for this very moment. The Empire's failure was not due to luck, it was due to the inexorable strength of human resolve. As they reached their ships, the sisters worked in tandem. Solara provided strategic commands, drawing on her experience, while Elena coordinated the fleet's movements, ensuring no ship was left behind. The docking bay erupted into controlled chaos as humans and machines clashed briefly. Every action was calculated, every decision deliberate, and yet amidst the tension, a sense of unity prevailed. Humans were not perfect, but their resilience was unmatched. Even in the shadow of death, they acted with courage. The fleet launched into open space, pursued by Imperial ships that now realized they had been deceived. Energy blasts streaked through the void, some finding targets, others narrowly missing. Alina's fleet maneuvered through asteroid belts and nebulae, using terrain and technology to their advantage. Selara, freed from captivity, directed countermeasures, guiding the fleet through ambushes and attacks. Together, the sisters formed a dual force of intellect and audacity, complementing each other in ways the Empire could not predict. As the last of the Imperial forces fell behind, Alina allowed herself a moment to breathe. Selara turned to her, a small smile on her face. "You've grown stronger than I imagined," she said quietly. "The Empire may have feared me, but they will fear you as well. They will see that humans are never defeated by fear alone." Alina nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility but also the exhilaration of success. The mission was dangerous, the odds had been overwhelming, but humans had prevailed. Not because they were stronger, but because they refused to surrender, because they acted with courage, intelligence, and unity. Word of the rescue spread quickly. Colonies and fleets across human-controlled systems received transmissions detailing the mission. The feared princess was free, and the unassuming younger sister had proven herself not only capable but extraordinary. Hope spread like wildfire, rekindling resistance movements, inspiring those who had thought all was lost. The Empire, shaken and humiliated, faced a reality they had not anticipated. Humans were not merely survivors, they were innovators, strategists, and fearless warriors. The galaxy began to see humanity not as prey, but as a force to be reckoned with. In the quiet that followed the chaos, the sisters stood together on the observation deck of the flagship, watching stars drift past. The silence was not emptiness, it was the calm after a storm, the moment before the next challenge. Selara spoke first, her voice soft but firm. "You have done more than I ever imagined, Alina. You have shown that courage is not limited to one person." "Humans do not rely on legends, they rely on each other." Alina smiled faintly. "We act because we must, we survive because we choose to. Fear may follow us, but it will never define us." The sisters knew the Empire would strike again. Imperial fleets were still vast, systems under their control remained dangerous, and countless battles awaited. Yet humanity had gained more than a tactical victory. They had shown that courage, ingenuity, and unity could overcome the most formidable challenges. The feared princess was back, yes, but now she was joined by another force equally formidable. The younger sister who had risen from shadow to light, who had proven that fear was a tool humans could use against their enemies rather than succumb to. And somewhere in the galaxy, the Empire recalculated. They would come for the humans again, but they would no longer underestimate them. Humanity had shown that one princess could inspire fear and another could ignite hope. Together, they were unstoppable. The stars burned cold and distant as the human fleet gathered near the outer rim of the contested sector. The sisters stood side by side on the flagship's bridge, their faces reflecting the calm before the storm. Selara, the feared princess, had been freed and now lent her experience to the fleet, while Alina, who had risen from the shadows, had earned the loyalty and trust of thousands. Together, they were more than leaders. They were symbols of human audacity, resilience, and unity. Beyond the fleet, the Empire massed its forces, confident that a final strike would crush the rebellion once and for all. They did not understand that humans fought differently. They relied on strategy, cunning, and the unshakable belief that they would survive. Alina studied the tactical displays, plotting each move with care. "We cannot match their numbers," she said, "but we can outsmart them, divide their attention, disrupt their formation, and exploit every weakness." Selara nodded, her eyes scanning the readouts. "We have learned their arrogance. They expect fear. They will not expect this, two sisters leading one people." The sisters exchanged a glance, a mixture of determination and unspoken understanding. Humanity's future depended on this battle, and failure was not an option. The fleet moved into position, using nebula clouds and asteroid fields for cover. Small squads flitted ahead like shadows, drawing Imperial attention while larger ships prepared for the main strike. The Empire's flagship loomed in the distance, a massive structure of steel and firepower, flanked by dozens of heavily armed cruisers. They had believed that eliminating Solara would end human resistance, but they had underestimated the other half of the equation, the sister who had emerged stronger, braver, and wiser than anyone expected. Alina's fleet moved with precision, every ship knowing its role, every crew member aware of the stakes. The first engagement began with a sudden volley of energy blasts from decoy ships. Imperial forces surged toward the illusion, believing they had detected the main human fleet. In the chaos, Alina's smaller strike teams slipped past defenses, disabling communication relays and targeting key weapon systems. The Empire's formations faltered as attacks came from directions they did not anticipate. Ships that had seemed invincible now faced coordinated disruption from a species they had long believed inferior. Every human pilot, engineer, and strategist moved in sync, guided by the sisters, leadership, and the shared determination of a species unwilling to bow. Within the Empire's flagship, confusion erupted. Admirals shouted orders, their screens flooded with false readings and sudden power failures. They could not comprehend how such a small, insignificant fleet could strike with such precision and force. Meanwhile, Alina's teams had already reached key boarding points, preparing for the decisive phase of the battle. Solara, freed from captivity, led teams through the corridors of the Imperial flagship, disabling internal systems and diverting troops to create chaos. The sisters moved in tandem, one guiding the fleet from space, the other navigating the heart of the enemy's stronghold. Humanity's ingenuity was on full display. As boarding teams clashed with Imperial troops, the sisters coordinated each strike, ensuring minimal casualties among civilians and their own forces. Solara's tactical brilliance complemented Alina's adaptive strategies. Together, they became unstoppable. Humans had never relied on sheer numbers alone. They relied on quick thinking, courage, and the ability to turn disadvantage into advantage. Soldiers who had once doubted their chances now fought with renewed vigor, inspired by the courage of the two leaders and the hope of freedom for countless colonies. Alina directed a series of maneuvers designed to trap the Imperial fleet in a narrow corridor between asteroid fields. The ships moved swiftly, their engines quiet but lethal, as energy shields deflected incoming fire. Every move was precise, every decision deliberate. The Empire's commanders scrambled, unable to predict human actions. Their arrogance, which had served them so well against other species, now became their greatest weakness. Humans acted unpredictably, creatively, and with unwavering resolve. Solara, navigating the interior of the flagship, led her team toward the central command room. Imperial officers tried to regroup, but systems were failing and confusion reigned. Solara's presence alone inspired fear among the guards. She had been the Empire's nightmare, and now she was joined by her sister, who had proven that intelligence and courage could emerge from the unlikeliest places. Together, they represented the unstoppable human spirit. Every strike, every sabotage, every tactical move reminded the Empire that humans would never be subdued by threats or fear. As the sisters converged in the central command chamber, they encountered the Imperial Admiral, a man who had never faced humans who could think beyond brute force. He sneered, confident that his fleets and soldiers would crush the intruders. Solara stepped forward, energy weapon in hand, while Alina positioned herself strategically, flanking the Admiral. "You underestimated us," Solara said calmly. "You believed one princess could be feared, but two sisters are unstoppable. Humans do not fight for glory. We fight for survival, and we fight for each other." The Admiral's confidence wavered as he realized his arrogance had blinded him. The final confrontation was swift and decisive. Human teams disabled the remaining defenses, and the sisters led the final charge, forcing the Imperial Admiral to surrender. Outside, Alina coordinated the retreat of the fleet, ensuring that no ship was lost unnecessarily. The Empire had suffered a humiliating defeat. Ships retreated, formations collapsed, and the once mighty fleet limped away in disarray. Humans, though outnumbered, had achieved victory not through overwhelming firepower, but through courage, ingenuity, and unity. The galaxy witnessed a species that refused to submit, proving that audacity and intelligence could triumph over brute force. In the aftermath, human colonies celebrated. Messages of hope and triumph spread from system to system. The sisters addressed the fleet together, their presence commanding attention and inspiring courage. "This victory is not mine alone," Elena said. "It belongs to every human who dared to act, who refused to bow, and who believed that we could shape our own destiny." Celera continued, her voice firm. "Humans are not defined by fear. We are defined by our courage, our ingenuity, and our unity. Today we have shown the galaxy that no empire can suppress the spirit of humanity." The sisters then set their sights on rebuilding and uniting the scattered human systems. Colonies that had lived in fear now worked together, sharing resources, knowledge, and strategies to prevent future imperial aggression. Elena's leadership had shown that courage could emerge in unexpected places, and Celera's experience ensured that human strategy remained sharp and adaptive. Together, they represented the best of what humanity could be: fearless, intelligent, and determined. The Empire, humiliated but not entirely defeated, began to reconsider its approach. They had faced a species that refused to submit to fear, that adapted and overcame in ways they could not anticipate. For the first time, Imperial commanders recognized that humans were more than obstacles. They were a force of nature, unpredictable and relentless. And within the human fleet, the sisters' names became synonymous with defiance, bravery, and hope. In the quiet of the flagship's observation deck, the sisters stood side by side, looking out at the stars. The battle was won, but the war for freedom was ongoing. "We've done something remarkable," Celera said softly. "Not just victory, but proving that humans cannot be underestimated." Elena nodded. "They feared me when I was hidden, and they feared you when you struck. Now they will never underestimate humanity again. We are more than one princess or another. We are all of us." The stars stretched endlessly before them, each one a testament to the courage and resilience of humanity. The galaxy had seen the audacity of a species that refused to bow, that fought not only with weapons but with minds, hearts, and spirit. The sisters understood that their journey was far from over. Empires would rise, challenges would appear, but humanity's light, cunning, brave, and united would endure. And so the sisters prepared for the next steps. They would unite human systems, strengthen defenses, and continue to strike with precision and courage. The Empire might regroup, but humans had shown that fear was a tool, not a master. Wherever threats arose, humans would adapt, resist, and overcome. The legacy of the feared princess and the sister who stepped forward would inspire generations. As the fleet navigated the stars, the two sisters stood together, symbols of human audacity. They were proof that courage could emerge from any corner, that leadership was not born from titles alone, and that humanity, united, could face any challenge. The galaxy had learned a lesson. Humans could not be defeated because they did not fight for fear or glory. They fought for each other and for the unbreakable spirit that defined their species. The Empire would remember this day. They would remember two sisters, one long feared and the other underestimated, who together had turned desperation into triumph, weakness into strategy, and fear into hope. The story of humanity's courage spread across star systems, carried by whispers, transmissions, and the countless survivors who had witnessed defiance at its finest. For humans, this was not the end. It was only the beginning of a new era. And in the vast, dark expanse of space, the stars themselves seemed to shine brighter for humanity. They had shown that one princess could inspire fear, but another could inspire hope, and together they had shown that the human spirit was unstoppable. The Empire feared one princess until the second stepped forward,